How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to my channel. It's been a while. It's been a few months. We've been moving. We're finally in the new place. It's very similar to the old place, just kind of flipped. Anyways, we're back. We're doing something a little bit different today. I went to Anime Pasadena yesterday and just took some photos of some of the meetups. I didn't set up any shots or anything. I had a few people on Instagram ask me how I edit my, I guess, like snapshots, the ones that are either at a meetup or there's just a lot of people in the background. How I edit those photos, and I figure I may as well just show you guys. So I have a few photos to go through today. There's a few down here, but we're not going to go through all of them. I'm just going to hand pick a few and just kind of walk you guys through how I edit them, what I would do. It's nothing crazy. I'm not like a professional or anything like that, but I do go to a lot of events and edit a lot of photos like this. So let's get started. This is the first one. First off, too much of the sky here. I probably should have cropped a little bit in camera. I probably cropped a little bit too high, like on her thighs here. Cut off her hand a little bit, but that's okay. I think we can still use it. So we'll probably just try to get as tight as possible. The dude in the background here, I kind of want to cut him out as much as I can. I think that looks pretty good. Maybe we can shift it down slightly as well. I think maybe something like that looks good. All right, so after cropping, kind of just want to get our basic stuff down, like our exposure. Probably just want to bump that up slightly. I always, with the skies in the photos, and a lot of like kind of bright shirts and things in the background, I generally drop the highlights quite a bit, and you'll see it kind of brings a little bit of detail back in the roof and like the trees and whatnot. So I'll drop those down, and then because she is in a lot of black, I don't want to lose a lot of detail in her clothing. So we can bump the shadows up. And normally when I bump the shadows up, I also like to drop the blacks down just to keep the contrast in the photo. And then again with the sky, kind of drop the whites down just a little bit, just kind of off feel. Let's bring the highlights down more. Yeah, let's bring them a little bit more. Now, as I'm kind of going through, I'm realizing the photo looks a little cool. So let's bump up the temperature a little bit. Let's call it 5500. I think that looks better. You can already see it kind of in her skin tones. Looks a little bit better. Photo looks a little more natural. We'll bump the vibrance up a little bit as well. And then saturation up a little bit. The only thing that I'm concerned about seeing here is the greens and the trees look really vibrant. So I think we're going to have to try to tone that down. Next up, we'll do the tone curve. A lot of times for just these shots, I like doing just a simple S curve. And then I'll kind of tweak it as we go. Nothing too crazy, but I just like getting a little bit of contrast in. And then I like bringing up this node here to give it, I don't know, a film look, I guess. Just the blacks aren't so deep. It doesn't look so digital, I guess. I don't know. I just kind of like how it looks. So it's kind of what I do on a lot of the photos, especially these ones where there's a lot of black in, say, the costume. And I kind of just tweak with these numbers. I generally bump these midtones up just slightly. A little goes a long way when you're messing with the tone curve. So really small adjustments here. This might even be too much. And then some people like to bring the whites down, but I found that when you have a sky in the photo, it really kind of dulls it down. So I'll leave that up most of the time. Some of her helmet looks a little bit dark here, but I think it looks, we'll fix that later. We're probably gonna have to mask it out and just kind of up the exposure on her a little bit, maybe up the shadows on her. But before we do that, I want to take down some of this green. So let's actually take the hue. We're gonna push the green a little bit more towards yellow. Go to saturation. I'm gonna drop the green a bit. Don't want to go too far. Just want to drop it slightly. And then I want to drop the luminance of the green a little bit also. So I like it about there. And if we look at the before and after, we're kind of just getting the colors to pop a little bit, the skin tones to pop slightly. We do have to fix the exposure on her. That's where we head over to masking. Every single photo, the first mask that I do is a subject mask where I try to just grab our subject. I may or may not do anything to it. I just generally try to have that be the first mask so I have easy access to it. Now, it kind of auto found the mask here. you can see sometimes it's not perfect, and it kind of found the arm. So you want to make sure to subtract things that you don't necessarily want in there. We're not going to be too exact because, again, this isn't like a professional photo or anything. It's just going to go up on Instagram. It doesn't need to be pixel perfect. So I like that. And then for the background, for everything else, I want to duplicate and invert the subject mask. And this will give me everything but her, rather than having the AI try to auto sense it. So we'll go to the background. Now on her really quick, I do want to bump the shadows up a bit just to bring some of that detail out. I didn't want to do it globally on everything else because I liked how dark the clothing in the back was. The goal here is to try to get her to, I don't want her to pop off the photo. You don't want it to seem like she's like photoshopped in. So there's a real fine line to hit here, but you also want the viewer's eye to go to your subject and not get so distracted by the background. A lot of the times when you're shooting at conventions or just meetups and everything, you get things like this blue bag in the back that's just distracting, or like someone in a yellow jacket, or people's arms here that are just distracting from your subject. And so your goal here is to try to get the viewer of your photo, get their eye to look at your subject and not get overly distracted by what's around. So that's kind of what we're going for. And you'll see, like, if you bump the exposure too high, it starts getting this feeling that that she doesn't belong there. So real fine line here. I actually don't even know if I want to go that high. I think we just keep it a little tame for now. Let's just get her clothing exposed properly where you can see the details. Somewhere around, I don't know, here. And then when we go to the background, this is one of the things that I like to do a lot. I like to drop the saturation slightly. Do not overdo it. Don't be the guy. Actually, you know what? Don't let me tell you not to be the guy. If you like your photos black and white in the back with just the subject in color, do you make your photos how you like? If you like them, who cares what other people think? But that being said, I do like to drop the saturation slightly. Drop it just a little bit, but without the saturation dropped, we take a look and there's just like a little pop. So before and then after, before, after, before, after. Probably a little too much still. We don't want it to look unnatural. We just want to bring your eye a little bit away from those greens on the trees, from the blue in the bag. Just try to dull down that background just slightly. And then the next couple of masks that I like to make are linear gradients. And this is, again, just trying to pull your eye to the subject. The first one is to try to bring exposure down in the background. So I like to bring it down and really keep the gradient pretty heavy. We can adjust where we want this exactly, but linear gradient from the top down here, and we're going to subtract the subject. And you'll see that it's going to cut her out pretty well. There's a little bit here that didn't get cut out. We'll see if we end up lowering the exposure enough for that to matter. We can go in and subtract object and just really fine tune this. But for now, we're just gonna mess with it like this. And we're just gonna bring the exposure down a little bit. Again, you can see that, like, if you go too far, she starts looking like she's photoshopped in there. So you just want to bring it down slightly, just enough to bring some of the harshness of the sky down. And bring it down a little bit more. Somewhere around here. Can also bring the blacks down a little bit, get a little bit more of the contrast. And could bring down some of the highlights. I don't think that looks so unnatural. So we'll try that. We'll bring some of the blacks down. And I think this is looking good. I do think that her helmet and things are too dark still, so we're gonna have to fix that. Gonna lower this mask slightly also. And then the next mask is gonna be similar, and we're gonna do it from the bottom up. So another linear gradient, bring it up this way. And again, we're going to subtract the subject. Now, this is gonna subtract the arm. Now, this subtracted the arm as well. So if you remember when we selected subject earlier, that arm was included. So we're going to undo that. And we're actually going to start subtracting this stuff semi-manually. what we're going to do is go subtract, and we're going to select, we'll use a brush first, and we can paint out this kind of middle section here with her body. Again, doesn't have to be perfect, but her clothing here we can get out, and then kind of in her arm area here, we can paint that out. We're not going to do anything super drastic, so if you're missing, a little bit, it's not the end of the world. And then here, I think we're going to use a different tool. So we're going to go subtract object. This works really good when you have solid colors. So we're going to use this and grab that whole arm sleeve, and it should grab it pretty good. Yeah, there we go. And then we're going to do the same thing here for like her leg and like where her hip is. And we're just going to keep subtracting objects. There might be an easier way of doing this. This is just how I've always done it, and it's worked for me for the most part. So subtract another object, and you kind of have to do it in chunks of whatever the solid color is. So here we're doing her skin first, and then we're going to go where I guess her underwear is. Subtract object, and just do this piece of clothing. And we're going to continue this through all the way. Subtract another object, and we're going to get just this chunk of skin here, and then this chunk. And then you can go through and kind of fine tune. Really, I see a bit here, like part of the clothing that could be better. Let's see if we can go ahead and just grab that. And then I can kind of see a few kind of red spots in the middle here. So we're just going to do a brush one more time and really just try to grab a lot of this right in the middle of her body. I think that's pretty good. And then from here, we can just drop the exposure a bit, just enough, not to where it looks, unnatural, where shade wouldn't go like that, but just enough to really kind of take your eye off of that background. I like around there. Then one thing I kind of noticed is her skin tones. I'd like them to pop just a little bit more. So what you can do is go to your subject mask, use the point color, just grab around skin tone-ish, and you can move the saturation up a little bit. You're going to get into this like Cheeto skin realm if you go too high, but if you just push it slightly into that zone and then up the luminance a little bit, it kind of brings it back down. So up the luminance a little bit, somewhere around here. And actually, one thing really quick that I'm not 100% liking is kind of down here where her hips kind of meet this background. It does almost look a little cut out-y. I think this exposure might be dropped a little too much on the gradient. She kind of looks a little, if you look at the side of her legs, so I don't think we can push it that far. Push it about here. Kind of like where that is. And then her helmet. I actually didn't plan on doing this much editing to this photo, but we're kind of in it now. So we're going to do her helmet now. It's just a little bit underexposed. What we can do, because it's all black, we can select object and just grab this entire thing. And I'm fairly confident that it's going to grab the whole helmet. Yeah, that looks pretty good. And then we can bump the shadows up to just kind of expose it a little bit more. Drop the highlights slightly. Could even just bump the exposure up a little bit. We don't want the helmet to feel disconnected from her head, so just a little bit. And then after doing that, there's going to be a lot of tweaking back and forth. But after doing that, I can kind of see, again, she might be a little bit overexposed relative to the background. So the background, the mask, we can just bump that up just a little bit. Don't want to go too high, but bump it up just a little bit. I think this looks a lot better. And then lastly, what I like to do specifically for like female skin, sometimes with men also, but most of the time for females, I will create a mask and work on the skin. So you go to select people. This is the easiest way of doing it. It will generally detect the person pretty accurately most of the time. And then what you can do is grab, normally it'll have facial skin here, but there's no face, it's a mask. So body skin, and then we want to get this bottom parts of skin as well. But we're going to create the mask here with the body skin. And then we're going to add objects again, like we have previously. We're just going to add these 2 parts of skin. I'm not going to worry about the rest. We're not doing anything major, but we do want to make sure we get them added. And there's not a lot, crazy that I want to do here. I just generally like to go to the texture and clarity and just drop those down. You don't want to go too far because it looks a little hazy, but if you turn it up, you can kind of see what it's doing. But I'll drop it down a good amount and then drop clarity down as well. And it's really minimal, but you guys can kind of see the difference. This is with it off and then on, off and on. And it just smooths out the skin a little bit. You can overdo it pretty easy, so don't go too far. The texture, we're actually going to bring back up a little bit, kind of in this range. I think that looks pretty good. And that's kind of it. So if we look at the before and after, here's the before, here's the after. One thing that I recommend when you're editing photos is take a step back, take a few minutes, come back and see if anything stands out to you. Immediately when I'm doing this, I can see that I don't like quite how exposed she is. It might be a little overexposed relative to the background. I think the photo looks fine, but I think relative to the background, she might be a little too much. So what we can do is go into our subject mask and just drop her exposure. I mean, such a small amount. And I think that looks pretty good. So before and then after, just a little bit more focus on her, a little less emphasis on the background. The skin tones are brought out just a little bit more, warmed up the photo slightly, and you can just see a little more detail in her costume, both in the gloves, the shirt, the helmet, all of it. It doesn't quite blend together so much. So anyways, that's the first one. Let's move on to the second photo. Okay, really quick. We came back to this photo. Like I said, step away, come back, came back to this photo, kind of noticed a lot of blue going on in her helmet. And then this kind of distracting bag looks a little bit blue. So I do think if we lower the saturation on blues just a little bit, we're not going to get rid of this bag, but if we can get her helmet to just not look so blue, I think that kind of goes a long way. So when we look at this, specifically at her helmet, don't worry about the tree in the background, but you kind of see the bag isn't as dominant, and then the top of her helmet isn't so harsh on the blue. So think that looks a bit better. I'm sure I'll come back, maybe make a couple tweaks. So this photo I really liked. However, I think the first thing I do is always adjust the crop. I think we can try to get this guy out of it and just put a little more emphasis on what's going on here. Off screen, off frame, out of frame, there's a guy kind of handing a rose to her to pose for the photo. So I kind of want to put a little more emphasis on that and try to cut out as much as the background as possible. It's generally what I try to do each photo. Unfortunately, I might have to cut into like her arm. Kind of best practice to not do that. But in this case, I can get more of the guy out and then put a little more emphasis on what's going on in the photo here. Just kind of want to play around with it. This might be too tight. Kind of like that. We can also do is play around with the aspect ratio. We can kind of put it in like the Instagram aspect ratio. I kind of like it in the original, and that actually kind of worked out here. Do we want a little bit? We're kind of getting the guy all the way in the background completely out. So there's a fine line between like chopping it at her elbow here looks weird. Don't want to come too close. But I do actually think something like in this vicinity might work. Yeah, her arm is cut off, but you do see her hand. You kind of see the expression on her face. You see the rose. I think this is kind of what we are going to work with. I kind of like following rule of thirds-ish, sorta. I kind of just do it. Kind of looks good. I have a second monitor here where I can see the output of the crop. So I think we work with something like this, and we tweak some of these initial settings. Let's up the exposure a bit so that the key parts of the photo are exposed properly. I think some of the highlights are a bit much, so we're going to bring some of those down. Shadows generally need to come up, and I generally bring the blacks down slightly. Whites, she has a lot of white on her costume. We're going to bring it down a little bit. Maybe bring the highlights down a little bit also. And then to me, the photo looks maybe slightly too cool. It's close. Let's bump it up to be just a little bit warmer. Something in this range I kind of like. And sometimes I like messing with the dehaze. In this case, I think it makes the whole thing too white because her costume is, there's a lot of white, a lot of bright in it. So when you make it a little hazy, it looks a little off. When you up the dehaze, it kind of puts a little too much contrast in there. So we'll stick with that. Bump the vibrance up a little bit. I always like to do. And then saturation I kind of play with. There's a lot of pink, a lot of reds here. So maybe we don't touch the saturation. And then we move to our tone curve. As usual, we just put a very simple S curve. Let's bring that up. Don't want to go too far. And then because there's a lot of whites in the photo, I don't want to bring this down. I want to keep the detail up there and not crush them so much. Something like this. I think it's a little underexposed now with these tweaks. So let's go back up and just bump the exposure up slightly. We're going to want to get a little bit more emphasis on like her face and things, but we're going to do that when we mask out the background a little bit. This is looking pretty good. So as far as, so for her skin tones, we can up the saturation on the orange just a little bit and then up the luminance a little bit, and that will bring out kind of her face. It does it globally, but there's not, I think it's fine to just work with it here. So let's up it slightly. And I like cranking the sliders all the way up to really see what else it's affecting. There's a little bit in the background that it's affecting, but I don't think it's enough to be overly worried about it. So bump up orange a little bit, and then the luminance. From here, it's already looking pretty good. So if we look at the before and then the after, there's just more emphasis on our subject. The colors look a bit better, and then with the crop, the focus is pulled more towards our subject. So now we are going to go to masking. It might be a little too warm now that we've kind of made some tweaks and brought up some of the oranges and stuff. So I might want to reel it in a little bit, maybe back to just the 7,000 where it was. Could even push it further, a little cooler, but I kind of like the slight warmth. So let's start with the masking. I always just do the subject mask first. And I assume this is going to pick up the rose and maybe this hand in it too, which will be great for what we're doing. Yeah, it did. It picked up some of the railing here, which is not ideal. So let's subtract the parts of the railing. Subtract with a brush and kind of this area. Subtract objects and get this chunk of railing also. So I do think that's close enough. Then we're going to duplicate and invert the mask. There's not a whole lot of color in the background. Normally with this background mask, I like to drop the saturation a little bit, which we probably still will end up doing. The warmth of kind of the brick is a little bit distracting because it is very close to getting into that like skin tone, this hair kind of range. So if we drop it down just a little bit, I think that brings more attention to our subject. So this is with it, without the saturation, with the saturation. Very subtle, but I think you can tell. Next, a linear gradient, and we're going to bring that down a little bit at an angle. And we're going to subtract the subject again and just drop the exposure slightly. Don't want to go too much, just want some really slight tweaks here. Create another one. We're going to go from the bottom up. We're going to play around with this one, kind of hitting our subject still, because her shirt is pretty bright down here, and we want the attention to be more in this range with her face. So we're going to drop the exposure even on the shirt. Kind of see how that goes. It's very subtle, but I do think it works. We can even kind of extend it a bit and bring it up a little bit higher. I think something like that works. And one of the things that you can experiment with, I don't do it too much because I think it can get overdone pretty easily, is put a radial mask around where you do want the focus to be, and just slightly, I mean slightly, bump up the exposure. It's very easy to overdo it. So you can just go very slight. I do also think that kind of around her face area, the shadows are still, I mean, more so just on her, the shadows are still pretty dark. So I think I actually want to bump up exposure, bring up the shadows on her a little bit, bring the black slightly back down. I think we can keep the highlights, maybe drop them a little bit, get a little bit of detail back in the hair. I think this is looking pretty good. Again, last thing I like to do is the skin. So we'll select people here, and then we'll do facial skin as well as body skin. It's not going to get all of it here. Normally I would go in and fine tune it. We're not going to do that. One of the things I do like to do on the face skin though, let's create the mask. And one of the things I like to do on face skin is, if you lower the clarity and the texture, it's going to take out a lot of the facial features as far as like her smile, or like the line on her lips, or the line of her nose, or her eyelashes, or things like that. And so it doesn't look great. So what I like to do is subtract a brush and go in with a really small brush and just erase out some of the features that you want to keep sharp. Like you don't want to soften where her teeth are, but like some of these like makeup lines, let's say, you want them to stay sharp. Some of the lines, because she is smiling, you want, you want that stuff to stay sharp. Same thing here, where the nose is, the line of the nose here, all of this. And then of course her eyes, eyelashes. Now we're not doing any major tweaks, so even if it's not evenly softened on her skin, the changes we're going to do, you're not going to notice these, but you're not going to notice the kind of hard lines where the softness ends, but you will notice if you're softening hard lines. Does that make sense? I feel like that doesn't make sense. So this is what I kind of go for. I know it looks a little bit weird. So when you go in, you lower the texture, you lower the clarity, and it's very subtle. This is without it. This is with it. It's just a little bit smoother. Without, with. It's just a little bit smoother. It is very subtle, but this is probably where I would leave this photo. And when we look at it, this is the before, this is the after, the before, the after. This is what the full photo before the crop, but again, before and after. This one, not a whole lot of crazy work done, but I do think that your eye is drawn to the subject and you're not overly worried about what's going on in the background. So that's it for this video. Just going to do these photos. They actually took a lot longer than I thought they would. I'll try to do a little bit faster edits next time. But this is my first time doing it. I feel like I was kind of ranting. Either way, hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you want more of this content, if you like this content, let me know in the comments. I don't know if I have it up yet by the time you're seeing this, but I do have some POV photography stuff from Anime Pasadena when I took these photos. That should be going up soon if it's not up already. And then I'm going to go through and edit more of these photos. I've got a few that I've picked out. I'll edit some of these in the next video. Yeah. Again, if you like the content, like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.